Welcome to Cut to the Chase, where we talk about compelling legal, regulatory, and public interest information and news. Your host is Gregg Goldfarb, an attorney, entrepreneur, investor, and activist.
All right, folks, it's time for our favorite podcast, Cut to the Chase. We're going to do a new game today. We're going to play Raise Our Hands. I want you to raise your hand if you have a will. I want you to raise your hand if you have a trust. I want you to raise your hand if you know what the difference between a will and a trust is. I want to see how many people out here own a business and know what will happen to their business, have actually designated what happens to their business if they get incapacitated or die while their business is still going on. I also want to know how many of you out there know what happens, where your money goes when you die if you do not have a will or a trust. Okay, I think everybody got the point. So I want to help you get some of the answers to these questions today. And I brought on Taylor Willingham from the big state of Texas, a estate and planning attorney. He founded Willingham and Galvan in 2010, and it's a multi-million-dollar estate planning and wealth preservation firm. Also asset protection, which you all know that I love, and you should protect your assets that you've worked so hard to accumulate. And before I finish my introduction of Taylor, I also want to tell you, a lot of people that do estate planning, wills and estates and all that, they're attorneys and all that stuff. Not only is Taylor an attorney, he also has a master's degree in personal finance, which separates him from the crowd, as far as I'm concerned. Taylor, how's it going? I know that was very long intro, but I wanted to get it all out there.
Hey, you got it all in 100%.
All right. So Taylor also with all of the work that he's done, has written 4 books, including the one that we're going to focus on today. Do I need a will, a trust? And the answer is yes. So Taylor, let's talk about wills and trusts. Who needs them? What's the difference? What happens if you don't have them?
Okay, well, I can start off with what is the difference, because that's the biggest thing that causes the biggest confusion for people when they come and see me is, well, that's why I wrote the book, Do I Need a Will or Trust, was because I kept getting asked the question, but they're completely different things. They do completely different things. So a will, most people are familiar with the idea, does 2 main things. It tells us where your property goes and who's in charge. That's really when the history through wills has gone back all the way from, as far as we can look back in society, people have been writing wills. However, the creation of a trust is a completely different thing, and it is more of a modern thing, if you want to call it modern. It really came about 1,000 years ago with William the Conqueror in England. But basically what a will does is it takes property and it divides the property between legal interest and beneficial interest. In other words, what it does is it gives one person the right to manage property for the benefit of another person. And kind of give you a little history of why that happened is in England, they didn't like the idea that you always had to leave property to your eldest son. Dads, moms were like, hey, I want something to also go to my other kids. And so they started this thing called usage, where they were giving really bad, I'm going to give a lot of terms here. They're very old. It's called a fee-off. And they would give this to somebody, where they would give a legal interest to somebody for the benefit of another person. Well, it caused problems with King Henry, the VIII, the famous one. And he didn't like this idea because they also started using it to avoid taxes, because as long as we're going to do things, one of the concepts of creating a trust was to avoid taxes. And so he wrote into law the laws of usage, which really today is was the beginning of trust law that exists with us now. And so trusts are this idea, we're going to take property and we're going to divide this interest. And because we can do that, there's a lot of amazing things that you can do when you do that.
Well, as the eldest son in my family, I'm not so sure that I like all these changes, but be that as it may, I'm going to have to go with it, all right, and be a modern guy. All right, so what happens if you just say, you know what, I'm too busy, I don't care, I don't even care about my family, whatever, what are the typical excuses that people give you for not having done this?
Yeah, so that's actually a very good question. So what happens when we don't do anything? And so every state, if you live in the United States, every state has developed their own rules. So the state legislature sat down and went, okay, if people don't do planning, how are we going to leave that property? And we refer to that as intestate succession laws. So every state has them, and every state does it different, which causes a lot of confusion. Like here in the state of Texas, one of the biggest kind of issues that we have with our system is that when you're a blended family, meaning you have a child outside of the marriage, then all of your property, if you have not done a will or anything, no planning, all your property passes to your children, not to your spouse. And that causes a lot of problems because people find out once their spouse passes away, oh, I'm not inheriting from my spouse. So that's a big issue in the state of Texas, but not every state does it that way. Every state has their own version of how they set it up. And the common excuse, of course, of why we don't do it, well, there's a lot of reasons why people don't do it, but the main reason is you're just not sitting around expecting to pass away. I mean, that's really what you're saying. You're like, I can keep pushing this back down the road. Some people, of course, have the fear. They feel like, well, once I do this, then it's going to cause something to happen, and I've done 10,000 estate plans. I can tell you it's not true.
Yeah.
That's not how it works. But these are some of the things, laziness, or, it's cost is another reason why people don't want to do it. They don't know, well, how much is this going to cost me? Is this going to cost me a fortune, an arm and a leg just to get this done? So there's a lot of things that cause the barrier between getting it done and getting it executed and putting it all together.
All right, so I want to go into costs or whatever, but before we go into costs, let's just talk about that wealthy family that doesn't do estate planning. Are they gonna, the parents eventually die? Is there gonna be like a tax implication for not having done any of this? Are the kids gonna not get as much of the inheritance? Or is it just like, hey, you know what? It's not, don't nickel and dime me.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different taxes that we have to look at. So first you have to look at states. So the death tax is known as the estate tax. That's what we call it. And in the United States, of course, you have an estate tax, but you have to be over a certain amount of money. You have to have over, right now it's $13 million. And you have to have over that amount per person. That's what you're allowed to exclude. So it doesn't affect a lot of people. There's a lot of people out there, but business owners usually get hit a little differently because the IRS can come value your business a lot more than what you think it's worth. And so that causes a lot of problems. So that's something that if you're a business owner, you got to be aware of. It's not what you think your business is worth. It's what the IRS is going to say your business is worth.
Yeah.
So if you're over that amount, you absolutely need to do estate plan or any form of planning, estate planning, tax planning, because what you have to do is anything over that $13 million is taxed at 40%.
Yeah.
So it's a huge tax that is hit. Now, one of the benefits, though, of like estate planning and everything in the tax sector, this is kind of a weird thing. I haven't really understood why Congress allows this, but when you pass away, your children actually get a stepped up basis in the property, meaning you inherit the property. And if your dad bought a house for $50,000 and it's appreciated to 1 million, if your dad went and sold it, he would have to recognize the gain. However, the kids right now don't have to. They get a stepped up basis. So now they sell it for $1 million. They don't pay any tax. So one of the issues that we have of why we tell people don't give your property to your kids while you're alive, if you're planning on keeping it, because if you give it, they're not going to get the stepped up basis that they could get after you pass away. And so there's some planning issues that goes with businesses too. If you're gifting off your business while you're alive to your kids, it can cause that problem. So there's some issues there. And that's why if you own a business, you want to sit down with an estate planning attorney that understands tax issues so he can kind of guide you through what's the best structure for you.
All right, so let's go back to the business owner. Let's say you are you have two other partners in the business. Can you still, in your estate planning, basically protect your business interests and determine where it goes? And do you have to like have your partners sign off on it? I mean, how does that all work?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question, because this causes a lot of problems, especially in community property states. So Texas is a community property state. Other states are separate property states. So things are handled a little bit differently, but I'm a Texas attorney, so I'm going to give you from our perspective. So in the state of Texas, we have this happen all the time, where you have two guys that they start a business together, they're going, and one of them passes away. Well, what ends up happening in Texas is the other part is inherited by the wife. And when she inherits it, she becomes the business partner. Well, that's a huge problem when you're trying to run a business, when now so-and-so doesn't know anything about the business at all.
Yeah.
And then still wants that check to come to her, because she's like, hey, we were getting $200,000 a year from this business. You need to keep paying me. And the partner saying, well, hey, it's because he was working. You're not working. That's why he was getting that money. So it causes that problem all the time. So when I have this conversation all the time when people are starting businesses and they come in and they're meeting with me and two of them walk in the door. And I say to my really big point I want them to focus on is, you're getting into a marriage when you get a partner in a business. That means that this is a completely separate thing that needs to be planned out. You have to think about what's going to happen when one of you passes away. So we do a lot of things like called buy-sell agreements to handle those type of situations, where someone buys out your interest with a life insurance policy. That's one way of doing it, because, for example, I'm an attorney. My wife can't own part of a law firm. I have a partner. So if I die, I want the law firm to go to my partner, and my wife gets the money from the life insurance policy. And that's how we handle that. So my partner doesn't have to deal with my family at all after I pass away. So you have to plan that out and think it out with your business partner. And also you have to do your own estate planning for personal things. So being in a partnership, if you have a partner, you have to sit, I mean, this is something that's going to happen. You have to sit down, you have to talk it out and really think about what's going to happen if one of us passes away. How is this going to function? Because most people that are running small businesses are critical to the business functioning. And so if they lose that person, it's going to usually go under if things aren't really well thought out.
All right. So I want to kind of, I guess, talk about modern issues. So you have the boyfriend and the girlfriend, they buy a house to live in. The girlfriend has a child from her earlier marriage. And then the boyfriend dies, or the girlfriend dies. And so she's got her child, and then the boyfriend's still alive. How does that all play out? Let's just say, to add another element of drama, let's say the boyfriend has his will and the girlfriend has her will, and they're not necessarily coordinated, I guess, especially with respect to that piece of property. Is that something that you see? Is that something that can be dealt with?
Yes. So this is a bigger issue, especially with younger generations now, because they don't want to get married. And there's a problem when you make that, I understand why a lot of people don't want to get married, because there's, it's like, hey, I'm going to lose my half of everything if we get divorced. And there's different things like that they worry about. And usually I explain to people, yeah, if you use the state law, but every state allows you to do a prenup or a postnuptial agreement. So when you get married, we divide the property how you agreed upon. So you don't really need to worry about that when you get married. But along your lines of the question is, okay, now we have this huge problem, because when we write the laws, we're assuming two people that are living together, boy and girl, or whatever situation you have, that you're married. And so all the laws fall under husband, wife, or, now we have a same-sex couple, so spouse and spouse. Well, when you're not that, the law really doesn't know what to do for you in those situations. So we have these scenarios that happen all the time. For example, okay, what happens in the state of Texas if two people are on the deed? Well, first we look at the deed at the ownership. Well, if both your names are just listed there on the deed, then we go, okay, then you guys own this house 50-50. That's how we assume it's 50-50 if there's no percentage listed off on the ownership. Well, in that situation, if boyfriend dies and he hasn't done any estate planning or anything. Well, his family gets half the house. It adds on a second problem. So, of course, in Texas, we've realized over the years that this is a problem because the family comes in and partitions the property, forces the sale of it. And now the girlfriend and the child are out in the streets. So in Texas, we went, well, we don't want that to happen. So we give life estates to spouses. So we say, you have a right to live there. Family can't kick you out. We don't want that scenario to happen, even if somebody willed their half of property to somebody else. Well, when you're boyfriend and girlfriend, you don't get those protections. And so if you're sitting there thinking out, oh, well, we're just not going to get married because, we don't want any of the problems of marriage. Well, there's also the other flip side where there's huge problems that can happen. So from not being married, because the law doesn't know how to handle you in your situation.
All right, so I want to focus on this because my guess is there's a pretty big percentage of people that are in their 60s and over that if they are in a partnership, are not married, necessarily married, and have kids from an earlier marriage. So, all right, boyfriend and girlfriend come in, they're 60 and they're in their 60s. They've got some money, they got some property. One of them has kids, the other one doesn't, or whatever. Do they both deal with you, or do they have to get their own attorneys, potential conflicts? Like, how does that all work out?
It depends on the client. So when someone comes in and usually talks to me, actually I had this earlier today where two people came in and saw me, and I had to talk to them if they're okay if I represent both of them in creating their estate plans. Ultimately, I said, I want to meet with you guys separately, and I'm not going to tell the other one what the other one's doing. So don't ask me what the other person's doing, but I needed to have some agreements with everybody if that's okay. Because some people don't want that because they're looking after the interest of their kids and they don't want to hurt the feelings of their, girlfriend. So they don't want to be sitting in a room with the attorney talking about the scenario where the girlfriend's hearing, oh, I'm not leaving you everything. And that's the thought that she has in her head what's going to happen. So there is that planning that you have to talk to the attorney, and the attorney has to verify, is this okay the way the setup is? And if it is, they can do it, but not, then we need separation.
All right, before we move on to my next topic, I wanted to go over the costs, the typical costs, doing a will and an estate. What are we looking at? $100,000?
So no, of course not. That's not anywhere. So you have a spectrum of different things, because of course, the more expertise that you're going to run into an attorney, the more that they're going to charge. I've seen, if you get into tax planning, you're looking upwards of $20,000 to do that. But usually it's worth every penny because the attorney's going to sit down and show you, yeah, you're going to pay 20 grand for this, but when you pass away, I'm going to save you $600,000 in taxes. Or you could end up, doing some other type of planning that on the tax side, what's going to save you far more than what you're going to spend. But if you're just doing basic stuff, you're going to spend anywhere from about 10 grand to if you're doing a trust package kind of thing, then to about $2,000, somewhere in that spectrum. And it's going to be based upon two major things that I tell people you look at. One is going to be the expertise, and then also the complexity of your issues. Because, if I'm sitting there talking to somebody and we're going, okay, we're doing asset protection, they own a business, they own all this other stuff. There's a lot of filing fees that come into play and different things like that. And a lot of people, of course, go, well, then should I just go online and just do it? And yes, there's a lot of services out there now that are online that you can fill in the form. And if all you're looking for is to fill in a form, then online services have gotten really good at doing that.
Yeah.
My biggest issue with telling people to do that is, one of the best things about hiring an attorney is, this is the most important thing. You want to find an estate planning attorney that's in your county that knows the probate judge that goes there. Because at the end of the day, when that attorney puts his name on that will, and if there's a will contest and people are trying or trust or whatever, and there's some attempt to overturn what you want, you're buying an insurance policy with that attorney. Because they look at that and they go, that judge has to go, well, gosh, there's Mr. Willingham. And, every time I run, I go and ask Mr. Willingham to show up and help me run my campaign, I don't really want to overturn his wills very often. You know what I mean? It's you're buying an insurance policy, plus the attorney knows the judge. They know how the system works. So they're very familiar. So you aren't just buying documents, you're buying an insurance policy. And I tell people there have been times that I've messed something up and I had to pay for it. It's like came out of my pocket. It's like, I screwed that up. I got to pay to have it all fixed. And that's part of the process of what I do is I'm selling you, yes, my expertise and everything, but I'm also selling an insurance policy. I'll be there to fix the problems if something goes wrong.
And also, because I do have a good colleague that does will contests, and I'd go out to lunch with him, so I'd hear his war stories. And I think it's more than just, hey, you're involved in the campaign, you know, to keep the judge in his or her seat or whatever. But the judges have, you know, presumably have grown to trust your work, and you're not, you know, Betty May is not being rolled in. They're all dementia ridden and, you know, signing away right in front of you. And you're like, oh, whatever, you know, I'm getting my money. I don't care. You know, they know you're not going to pull that one on
Actually,
public and all that.
I had a situation exactly like this. I had a client. She was great. Her name was Wanda. She came in year after year to do her estate planning. She always told me the same thing. I want all my children treated equally. I want my children treated equally. That was her thing that she told me every time. And then the last time, son wills her in her wheelchair and brings her in and was like, she wants to leave the farm to me, or I shouldn't call it a farm, bunch of plot of land. And it was worth about 1.5 million. And I was like, well, I need to talk to her by herself. I talked to her and she was really struggling, but she's like, yeah, just give him the property. And I knew this lady and I knew this is not what she really wanted. And so I said, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to execute this. She ends up passing away. It ends up going to probate. I had to go testify at that hearing. And when the judge heard my testimony, he ruled in favor of taking the land and dividing it out equally according to what she stated, because he knew who I was. And he knew that I wasn't going to just do anything for anybody when they walk into my office.
All right. So another issue, well, before I go on to my next topic, you know, you mentioned tax planning, and I know you are an estate planning attorney. Do estate planning attorneys also do tax planning?
So to a degree, yes. A lot of times, you know, I'll either have an actual income tax attorney specialist that I'll send people to, or a CPA that I go, okay, you really need to get into the weeds with this person. But there are some income tax things that we do to help out. Like, for example, small businesses, when people come in, I talk to them about the benefit of being an S Corp versus just running, especially like a plumber, the guy just runs his business through his name. There's some significant tax advantages that he can do by setting up S Corps and different things like that. So I would put myself as, I'm not an expert, but I know enough to help people out that have small businesses, but complex stuff, of course, you go someplace else. There's some estate planning attorneys that, okay, this is their specialty. This is what they focus on, is that income tax planning kind of section. But usually it's not big in estate planning fields because we don't deal with the tax returns. Yeah, I know there's a lot of attorneys that will be CPAs too, that are estate planning attorneys. That's a great mix sometimes to find that if you can, because it can really help with both of those scenarios.
All right. So my next topic, you know, I know people have heard of advanced directives, powers of attorney. And, you know, a lot of people are getting dementia. People are living longer, and Alzheimer's is becoming a bigger issue. And so where does that fit in with the whole estate planning, wills, trusts, and all that? What's an advanced directive, healthcare proxy, whatever it is? What do people need to think about doing before they can no longer think about taking care of themselves?
Yeah. So when you're doing your planning, you want to plan for two scenarios. One, when you pass, but the other one is if you become incapacitated. And we mostly do that through power of attorneys. You have your healthcare proxy, or what we call in Texas, we call medical power of attorney. That tells us who handles your medical decisions. And this is beginning very difficult. Like this today, I had an elderly lady, and her whole situation was she didn't have any kids. She's not married. She barely knows her neighbors. Who does she pick? Like, and so we spent 30 minutes going through every possible scenario. But for her, the biggest help was once she understood that, hey, we can create a trust, put your property in your trust, and then give your trustee the power to hire someone to help you.
Yeah.
So because she really didn't have that person that she trusted take care of her if something happened to her. And that gave her a lot of relief because she had a financial advisor that she really trusted. And that she felt like, oh, that financial advisor probably wouldn't be my medical power of attorney, but would probably hire somebody and help me out in those kind of situations. So the other thing, another situation that we dealt with recently is, well, I'll use one that it was in the news recently. I think it was yesterday or the day before in Hong Kong, a CFO or an employee gave $25 million of the corporation's money away to hackers because he got on a call and it was AI. It was an AI, looked like the CEO. And he thought that he was talking to the CEO face to face. And the CEO said, hey, send $25 million to this, wire it to this bank. And so he did it. Now it's blowing up because it's like, hey, this is one of the fears of the future, which is as the older we get, and this guy wasn't necessarily elderly, but it's showing the sophistication that elderly people are going to have to deal with if they're managing and running their own affairs. And so there might become a point where people need to start going, hey, I probably should put my money in a trust and put professional managers over it just in case so I don't give away my money, especially if you're entering in, I tell people once you get 80 or above, it's probably something you want to consider either a family member, if you want a family member, or a financial institution to handle your bills because things are just getting very difficult. I deal with fraud all the time. I own a title company, so we deal with fraud daily, and it's getting so sophisticated and so difficult for us to be able to identify and figure out what's going on because people can call you, and it sounds like them. And so all types of different problems, but having those people in place, those power of attorneys, and then the advance directive, what people commonly call a living will. That is the document if you're in a terminal or irreversible condition, whether or not you want them to keep you alive or let you pass away naturally. That's really the two options that you have. Why this document gets really important is most people don't understand that when you end up in those scenarios, you are now considered in a long-term care situation. So any type of boarding or any place to any facility, well, Medicare doesn't cover that. You got to pay for that yourself. So a lot of people do not want to financially devastate their family when they're just laying there not doing anything.
Yeah.
And they have no way to really live. And so they want to say, hey, if I'm in that condition, just let me pass away naturally. So that's why that document's important, is especially if you don't have any long-term care planning done, you want something like that to save people from huge costs of trying to take care of you.
So you mentioned something, you said professional trustees.
Yes.
I mean, so if we're going back to the example of the person that, they just don't know anybody or everybody in their life has died and they realize that they're losing the ability to really take care of themselves and they want to have a trustee and they're thinking, oh, I just have one son and my son's an idiot. I don't want him to be. Are there professionals out there, even for making your medical decisions that are insured, that, are qualified and all that?
Yes, so you can get professional trustees. Almost every financial institution out there will act as a trustee. Almost everyone's, I shouldn't say everyone. Like everyone will have a trust department that they will do it. They do it very well. They're expensive, of course, comparatively, than having a family member do it, but they do it right. That's the big thing I try to tell people. It's like at the end of the day, they do it right. And there's been less and less. Wells Fargo used to have a program where they would even act as medical power of attorney. They would just take care of you, everything. And I was told that they discontinued that, which was unfortunate because it was a good thing for a lot of, which is becoming more of the norm, which is I have no kids. I don't have anybody. My brother, I didn't have any, I had one brother, he died. He didn't have any kids. And so there's just no one there in that scenario. And so it's a big open field. It's a great field if you're looking to start business. Like, I mean, that would be someone on here listening right now was like, hey, I'm trying to figure out a business to do.
Yeah.
Professional medical power of attorney, if you have any medical background or anything like that, and helping people out. It's a huge opportunity, especially it's hard to find institutions that you trust that are okay. They're not going to take advantage of some person that doesn't know what's going on.
Yeah. All right. My last topic here before I set you free. And this might be silly. I don't even know. I just, one thing that I was kind of pondering, social media accounts.
Yes. This is actually a great question.
All right. So take it away.
Okay. So this is going to be a big thing. And I'll tell a personal story. I got into this like a month ago, and that was, someone was asking me about it. So I was like, okay, I'll look into it. And and I have two friends that passed away in the last 2 years, guys that I really loved and really enjoyed. And so I went back to both of their social media accounts. And the first one, I went through all the pictures and everything that he had. And then I remembered, we used to direct message each other, DM each other back and forth. And I went back to that, and it was like reliving all these memories because all of it's saved. And so I was just going through it, and it was so wonderful. And then I went to my other friend, and they're all deleted. Everything was gone. And it was just, it almost really felt like a huge loss. Like, oh, wow, I didn't save anything. Nothing's there anymore. And so it really opened my eyes. So I went in and I was like, okay, I need to really understand how they do this. And so each platform does it completely differently. And it gets very important with businesses to understand, because a lot of people are running TikTok videos, or they're doing reels, and they're making money off of that. And one thing you have to understand, if you're making money off that, in order to get paid, you have to log in and cash out. That's how you get paid. Well, TikTok nor Instagram are going to give anyone access to your account if you pass away. So if, some of these people are making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year off these accounts, and if you're wanting that to continue to your family, they got to be able to log in to the account that you're using. So that's number one. And that's important to understand. If someone's passed away, the other important thing to understand is like Facebook, Instagram allow you to memorialize these accounts. But once you do, you can't make any changes or add anything. So if you're running a business through your individual or personal account, that's going to be an issue, because people aren't going to be able to log in and do things on there. So for business owners, especially, it's really important to sit down and figure your social media out. If you had some kid set it up and he put it under his account, you need to make sure you have control of that, because it is becoming very, very valuable on the sense of the business side of people making money. But more importantly, I tell people all the time, well, I can leave assets all day long. But really, many years from now, what people really want are the memories that they have, the pictures and different things like that. And, your social media accounts are going to be incredibly important to your kids, grandkids. I mean, we just live in a different world where, our great grandkids will be able to get to know us, as long as of course, everything stays intact. But we don't have that right now. I mean, I do a lot of genealogy work. I love going on and researching my family. Can't find anything about people most of the time.
Yeah.
But that's going to be completely different 100, 200 years from now. They're going to go on and be able, as long as these things continue, if you preserve things, they're going to be able to watch these videos of what you've done through your podcast. And that's going to be, incredibly valuable to family members to really be able to see and get to know you.
Yeah, that's huge. And it's heavy too. I mean, who knows what's going to be 100 years from now? These platforms might be outlawed, banned. The internet might be a whole different animal at that point or whatever. But if it's not, and you're going to look, 5 generations later, like, hey, there's great grandfather. Look at him all bombed at that football game. He looked like he had a good old time. Yeah, it could bring a lot of joy to a lot of people, I guess. right?
Yeah, it makes you start second guessing what you post out there. Yeah.
Alrighty, I'm thinking like, all right, delete. Oh my.
Yeah.
All right. Well, listen, I think, for those that, were brave enough to put your hands up, including myself, because we didn't know the answers to those questions. Hopefully we've answered or gotten you closer to getting those answers. And we thank Taylor Willingham for doing this for us. Taylor, did I miss anything key?
No, I mean, the best thing that you can just do is talk to professionals in anything. So they're usually, what I found, if you really get someone that knows what they're doing, they'll save you more money than you'll pay them.
Yeah. And it's a good way to sleep easy at night, knowing that all these things are taken care of. So I'm going to end it on that note. What's the best way to get in contact with you?
Well, if you're in Texas, I'm a Texas attorney, so I really can only help people here in Texas. You can call me, our office at 214-250-4407. You can also email us at lawwg.com. And if you look up our webpage, it's lawwg.com or willprobateattorneys.com. Those are the different ways that you can get a hold of me. You can get my book online. Do I need a will or a trust? My information's in there too.
All right. And we will put that in the show notes as well. Taylor, thank you for appearing on my show today. And you take care of yourself, all right? And that'll do it. That'll do it for this episode of Cut to the Chase. If you have any questions, comments, you want to subscribe, rate and review, you know what to do, all right?
That's all for this episode of Cut to the Chase. But before you go, will you open up your podcast app and give us a 5-star review? You can also leave a comment about what you liked most or other topics you'd like us to cover. And please be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming shows. Thanks, everybody. Be safe out there.